So you ever heard of Dead by Daylight? Oh, who am I kidding? Of course you have, you horror-obsessed, Halloween-craving jump scare junkie.
Oh, fuck!
How else would you have found this video aside from Behavior's Beginner's Guide contest? I'm not exactly a big boy channel over here. But for those of you who haven't heard of Dead by Daylight, it's an asymmetrical, objective-based survival/kill-em-all game, depending on what side you're playing on, with that very cheesy yet strangely endearing 70s to 80s shot out of my mother's basement horror film vibe. Created by Studio Behaviour, this is their flagship game that pulled them out of said mother's basement and gave them a spotlight in the gaming industry as a real gaming studio. The game started off with humble beginnings back in 2016, and has slowly but steadily grown over the years into a behemoth of a title, consistently hitting the top 20 most played games on Steam, excluding players on PlayStation, Xbox, and whatever the hell that mobile version is supposed to be. It has gradually amassed a vast collection of killers, survivors, maps, items, perks, etc. Are you overwhelmed yet? Nee, but Flaming Lump, I hear you ask in your 2 hours of playtime baby nurse main voice. How do I kill the dudes? How do I 360 no-scope locker juke break the killer's stubby cankles? How do I rank 1 flashlight teabag at the exit gates? Well, patience, I'm getting there. Okay, but for reals, this guide isn't going to teach you anything particularly fancy. If you played over 50 hours and both sides of your brain are functioning, you'll probably know everything that I'm going to say in this video. This video is for our current and future baby killers and survivors out there, specifically the ones coming in on the new Stranger Things DLC. So I hope you're all holding on to your butts right now, because we got a lot to cover, starting with the survivors. Now there's a lot of stuff to cover outside of the match, but being the spastic little gremlin I know you are, I'm sure you want to get straight to the action. Every match will consist of you and 3 other survivors. Your primary objective as survivor is to find and fully complete 5 generators on the map, which will power the exit gates. You then open the exit gates and survive with your intact booty. While doing these generators, you'll come across a series of mini QuickTime events known as skill checks. Landing the pin in the hollowed out box will let you continue your action as if nothing ever happened, and landing it in the smaller filled box gives you a small bonus to that action's progression bar. Missing it entirely, however, will regress the progression bar and attract the attention of the killer, as well as the disgruntled looks of any fellow survivors within a 5-kilometer radius, because by association, you just revealed their location too.
You stupid!
The game gives you an auditory warning that a skill check is about to appear, so you're not going to get caught off guard so long as you didn't fall asleep holding the repair button, partaking in that interactive gameplay. Now these skill checks can happen on many things, from doing generators, healing or sabotaging hooks, to more killer contextual things, like snapping out of it against the doctor, or searching for a key in jigsaw boxes against the pig. Now while you're out there living out your repairman fantasies, it's important to keep your wits about you, and don't forget that somewhere out there, there's a big spooky killer with a sharp utensil, looking to apply directly to your jugular.
I can smell you.
As the killer closes in on your location, the heartbeat and jingle of the terror radius will get louder and more intense. When you hear this go off, that's your cue to start looking for some place to run or hide to. Most killers have a terror radius of 32 meters, and some killers have the ability to mask their terror radius so they can sneak up on you and scare you big time. If the killer does find you, the chase commences, and this is where the fun begins. While as a survivor you can't fight back directly, there are a lot of resources scattered across the map that can be used to waste the killer's time and keep you alive. The first and most recognizable tool for survivors are the giant multicolored pallets scattered around. At any time, a survivor can drop one of these pallets to block off a small walking path. If the killer is directly behind you when you drop it, the impact will briefly stun them, buying you some extra time to plan your next move. While a pallet is dropped, you can slide over it to quickly get from one side of the obstruction to the other, a movement option exclusive to survivors and a group of angsty teenagers with hunting knives. Finally, if the killer decides that they're tired of your shit, they can break the pallet, taking it out of play for the rest of the match. Windows are your other major tool for putting distance between you and the killer. Unlike pallets, the killer can vault windows as well, albeit significantly slower. The trade-off for this is that killers can't take windows out of the match. Also worth noting that windows can be blocked off if you vault that particular window multiple times in short succession while in a chase. This is a necessary countermeasure for some of the less well thought out window placements in the game. When you do inevitably get downed, the killer will take you to a nearby hook. Being placed on a hook effectively eliminates one of your lives, and it's up to your teammates to get you off the hook before those black creepy sky tentacle things come down to give you a smooch.
Need backup.
The first hook and it's not so bad. You can sit back and relax for a little while, maybe grab a drink and wait for someone to take their thumb out of their butt to come and save you. It's when you get hooked a second time that things get a little tense, a little high octane. Now, instead of sitting back and relaxing, you gotta spam that struggle button for dear life and pray to the Lord that a teammate comes to save you before your hand seizes up from all that repeated tapping and you accidentally kill yourself.
Help! Ooh, help!
And then on the third hook, you're just dead on the spot, so try and play it safe if you're on your last hook and stay out of the killer's view. Now, while you're out there making sure the killer has gotten his daily cardio, your remaining teammates should hopefully, and this is a big hopefully, be completing generators around the map, but sometimes things just don't go how we planned them to. Sometimes your teammates just can't stay alive in a chase for more than 10 seconds before planting their head promptly into the dirt. Sometimes you're the last person alive and only 2 generators got done. Well, my friend, that's where the hatch comes in. The hatch is the last chance for escape. It can only be opened with a key, more on that later, and will automatically open once 3 out of the 4 survivors have either escaped or bit the dust. Now, the hatch will spawn at a random location on the map, and don't confuse in conversation the hatch being spawned for the hatch being opened. The hatch only spawns if you're the last person alive, or, and prepare yourself for this one, when the number of currently alive survivors equals the number of completed gens plus 1. So for example, if 3 survivors are alive, 4 generators have to be completed for the hatch to spawn, and even then, it's still not open. So this is a PSA, kids. Don't be that guy who runs around the map looking for a hatch that hasn't spawned yet. Finally, the killer can close the hatch if it's opened, and if that happens, you're pretty much boned. Like if the killer closes the hatch, it powers the exit gates, but good luck getting one of those open without getting caught. But let's say it did work out. You did it. Give yourself a pat on the back, champ. You and your team worked like a well-oiled machine lathered up in butter, and you pumped out those 5 gens all lickety-split like. Well, you're not out yet, you hear. You still got work to do. Upon the 5th generator being completed, you get a visual notification of the location of the 2 exit gates on the map. Opening one will reveal the exit. Now, I'm not saying you're obligated to help your teammates get out before escaping, but you're totally obligated to help your teammates out before escaping. If anybody's being chased by the killer, on a hook or whatever, do your best to help them out to whatever extent you can without risking your own life. So long as the killer's not running this perk, which ironically you'll probably see a lot when you're first starting out, go help your teammates escape too. Go on. I know you didn't do all those gens by yourself, so go help a brother out. Get unhooks, 10 kits for injured survivors, whatever you need to do to help your fellow survivor, well, survive. It's not that complicated, guys, just do it. So what can you do to increase your odds of getting out? Well, in the pregame lobby, you can deck your character out with some both stylish and functional accessories. Ah yeah, looking good, baby. There's 5 different items and their associated rarities. There's the toolkit, the medkit, the flashlight, the key, and the one we don't talk about. Each of which come with a full set of add-ons that can either enhance or alter the item's functionality. The toolkit can be used to repair generators faster and unlocks the ability to sabotage hooks, which will break the hook for a while, making it unusable by the killer. Its add-ons consist primarily to the effect of increasing usage duration, as well as repair and sabotage speed. Medkits help you heal faster and unlock the ability to heal yourself, a highly coveted ability to many a survivor. Its add-ons consist of increasing usage duration, healing effectiveness, and the very powerful ability to sacrifice your medkit in order to heal yourself or another survivor instantly. Now we have the glorious flashlight, God's gift to survivors. This thing is BM Central, baby, I love it. The flashlight allows you to blind the killer for several seconds by shining the beam straight into their face holes. And most of its useful add-ons revolve around increasing the flashlight's battery duration, you seeing the trend yet? Increasing blind duration and tightening the beam of the flashlight. With a little practice and good positioning, you can save fellow survivors from being hooked if you can blind the killer at the tail end of their pickup animation. The flashlight is very useful in this situation specifically, but not particularly effective outside of it. The timing's a little precise and I won't go into detail here on how to do it. If you're curious, there are plenty of videos to look up to learn the timing. The key by itself does nothing other than grant you the ability to open the hatch early, and you need to bring add-ons in order for it to be useful outside of that one function. That being said, the key with add-ons is used to reveal the auras of nearby teammates or even the killer based on the add-on, and yes, of course, the obligatory usage duration add-ons as well. Finally, we got, the map. Look, as of the time of writing this, the map is hot garbage, okay? I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. The map of lesser rarity allows you to track the location of generators, while the rare one reveals to you hooks, totems, exit gates, and the hatch as well. And that's all well and good, but aside from the hatch, so long as you have functioning eyeballs, you should be able to spot all these things at a glance anyway. Now the rare map is just the common map with a bunch of add-ons slapped onto it essentially, and the one saving grace about the map is that you can track totems with it, a topic we'll talk about in the killer section, but even that's situational. Look, long story short, map bad, medkit good. Don't use this thing, you probably have better stuff. So items are all nice to have, but is there anything else I can do to help me out in game? If you mosey your eyeballs down the screen a little bit, you'll find yourself at the perks page. Now, there are a lot of perks in Dead by Daylight, and I'm not going to go through each one, but most survivor perks can be categorized into detection perks, which help you keep track of either the killer or your fellow survivors' actions and whereabouts, healing, which helps you heal yourself and others more efficiently, stealth perks, which focus on keeping you hidden from the killer, objective perks, which help with speeding up generators and the like, anti-pressure perks, which are perks that are designed to relieve pressure off your team by effectively wasting the killer's time, and distance perks, which are about making distance between you and the killer during a chase. Here are a couple of my recommendations of good survivor perks for new players. Bond is a perk that automatically reveals the auras of any nearby survivors. This gives you a lot of information on what your teammates are doing, which is super useful when you're not playing with a full group. Self-care gives you the ability to heal yourself without the use of a medkit, but at half the speed. Most good players nowadays prefer not to use it because healing takes forever, but when you're new, so are your teammates, and you can't trust them to have enough game sense or experience to heal you without failing a skill check. And now the killer knows where you are, and he's breathing down your neck, he's about to down you again, and you're swearing at your monitor about how bad your teammates are. With Sprint Burst, when you first start running, you will break into a sprint, giving you extra movement speed for the next 3 seconds. This is great for getting distance from the killer if and when he finds you, and gives you extra time to find a pallet you can use. Do note that, much like many of the people who play this game, Sprint Burst will leave you exhausted after those 3 seconds of running, which will put the perk on cooldown until that exhaustion timer is completely gone down. Additionally, other exhaustion perks, such as Live, Dead Hard, and Balance Landing, will not activate if you are exhausted from Sprint Burst. So taking more than one of these exhaustion perks is wasted potential. Urban Evasion is a popular pick among survivors who don't like confronting the killer. It allows you to move while crouching at the same speed as walking. You can use this to round obstacles better and remain out of the killer's view. Windows of Opportunity is the primo new player perk. It allows you to see the auras of pallets and windows that are nearby. One of the biggest problems new players face is not being able to identify the resources around them. Windows lets you see them ahead of time without having to memorize every tile in the game. There's more good perks, of course, but I don't want to start listing off too many perks for your feeble new player minds. This guide is already long enough as is. There's also a Tier 2 and Tier 3 version of every perk. It's nothing crazy, the stats just get tweaked so the perk in question is a little bit better as they rank up. Pick them up when you get the chance. Now do note, many of the perks in this game are tied to individual characters in the form of teachable perks, which basically means you need to level up that character to get the ability to get that perk on another character. So you want to play Nia but you want self-care? Well, too bad, bucko. You need to level up Claudette to level McFrickin' 40 before the game will even consider letting your Nia have self-care. And this applies to every teachable in the game. Now, if you've opened up the character page and wondered just who out of this lineup of strangely attractive people you should play, be relieved, my friend, because what survivor you play has no technical in-game benefit. I say technical because Ace Visconti is really quiet when he's injured, more so than the other survivors, and Claudette can be borderline invisible on some maps. Just pick whoever you think is the coolest or looks the nicest, or play for their teachable perks. I'd recommend Meg, Nia, Dwight, or Claudette if you're going to do that route, because they all have good, useful perks. But yeah, just pick the one you like. Now we've explained all these items, add-ons, and perks, but we haven't explained how to get them. Introducing blood points in the Blood Web. the grind that keeps on giving, and the resource that DBD players would sacrifice their firstborn to get in large quantities of. Each level will consist of at least one perk, some items, add-ons, and offerings. When you start out at a low level, it's not that bad, to be honest. It gives you like 5 or 6 items to grab and on to the next level, but things get massive as levels increase. On top of that, past level 10, the game will come in and snatch up some of the items in your blood web. Sounds bad, but we can use this to our advantage. With a little bit of planning, you can finagle the game to take some of the items you don't want, effectively decreasing how much you spend per level. At higher levels, we can have it block off a whole section of the blood web and save us a lot of blood points. Finally, rounding off this essay disguised as a survivor's section to a beginner's guide, I wanted to go through some of the do's and don'ts of being a survivor, as well as some general tips you might find useful. In-game, there's a thing that we didn't talk about, those being lockers. These things are a trap, trust me on this. You can hide in lockers to try and evade the killer, but you get caught in these things so often it's insane. New players love hiding in these things and look at you dumbfounded when the killer knew you were in there. Like, okay, they have their uses, but hide in locker probably shouldn't be your first instinct. If you get unhooked and you know the killer is preoccupied somewhere else on the map, you are safe to let your teammate heal you right then and there under the hook. The killer's not coming back for you and you're wasting time by running off to some corner of the map first. Additionally, if you know the killer is preoccupied with chasing another survivor, find something to do, quickly. The killer is playing against the clock, and you want to take down that clock as fast as possible by doing generators when you know it's safe. So I talked about sabotaging hooks with toolboxes, right? Yeah, it's honestly not that great. Yeah, it's funny to drop a hook in front of the killer's face when he's carrying a survivor, but it's super situational, and you can spend multiple minutes running around sabotaging hooks for it to never actually take effect. I know some hardcore Jake Park main who's living in 2016 is gonna hate my guts for saying it, but yeah, sabotaging hooks just isn't worth it whenever you could be pumping out gens instead. When you do something like hiding or healing, try to find out where the nearest pallet or window is just in case the killer finds you. Parking your butt out in the middle of no man's land is a good way for the killer to get a free hit on you. Chests will spawn in random locations around the map, which will contain a random item. These can be great and aren't a huge time investment. Just know that if you stop searching a box before you finish, the killer will be notified of your location. There is always one in or near the killer basement, so, use that information as you see fit. Much like any failed skill check, any rushed action will alert the killer of your location as well. This includes things like running while vaulting over windows and pallets, and running while entering lockers. Fully completing a generator and sabotaging a hook will also create a notification for the killer. Once either exit gate is powered or the killer has closed an open hatch, the endgame collapse will begin. Survivors are put on a timer in which they must escape or else be instantly sacrificed. You have several minutes, which is often enough time to make any last-minute saves for your teammates, but you don't want to get caught hanging around for too long. I didn't cover it here, but there's a huge skill set called looping that specializes in wasting the killer's time. Don't worry about learning it at the get-go. Focus on the fundamentals and look up looping tutorials later on. There are guides out there on looping by people who are far better at it than I am. Finally, and possibly the most important, if you are really interested in improving your survivor game, I highly recommend that you play killer as well. If you only play one side, you'll never get the perspective that comes from being experienced as killer. Your knowledge on scratch mark mechanics, target prioritization, and mind gaming will almost certainly be lesser than someone who plays as killer, and if you know how these things work, you can exploit them in your survivor play.
This is a loop. Is Carter still looping?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think I'm down here, boys. I'm down.
That's fine.
You just had to say something, Jesse.
I should have dropped that pallet. Ugh. Alright, now time for the killers. Alright, you future Doug Demogorgon mains, it's finally your time to shine. I've neglected you long enough. Just a note though, if you're thinking of being a killer main and skip the survivor half of this guide, I recommend also watching the survivor half. The killer half is a lot shorter because I go over a lot of terminology in the survivor half that I won't be repeating in the killer half. This video is long enough as it is, and it's 3:41 in the morning, so I'm trying to cut off some of the fat. Now I'm going to tackle this topic immediately because unlike Survivor, which killer you decide to play is actually a big deal. There are a myriad of killers in this game, and unlike survivors, they all play differently from each other. We've got the big ones, small ones, fast ones, sneaky ones, and if you're a meta slave, we've got something for you as well. Just to be clear, you can dominate most lobbies with any killer so long as you're good enough with the killer in question. Some killers are certainly better than others, but no killer is so bad that you're admitting defeat by playing them. There are a lot of killer tier lists out there, but I advise you avoid them and just pick a killer you enjoy the playstyle of. Me, I'm a pig main. Love me some Piggy. She's a fairly average killer in terms of meta relevance, but I do way better with her than I do with Nurse's Spirit. Winning games is all about practicing good play, not who you play. As killer, your main objective is to sacrifice all the survivors in the game before they can repair 5 generators, open the exit gates, and escape. Sounds simple, right? Well, that's because it is, in theory anyway, but in practice there's a lot to keep track of. When you boil down the factors of success as killer to their most basic elements, killer's all about keeping pressure on survivors by injuring, hooking, downing, or otherwise just not leaving them to their own devices for too long. A survivor left alone is a survivor who can do gens. But in order to do your job and kill the dudes, you gotta find them first. Now there are a lot of options in the game for keeping track of the general location of survivors, but the most commonly used one that is available to every killer is a game mechanic called scratch marks. By default, they last for 7 seconds and will fade as time progresses. Being able to track these scratch marks helps you keep track of survivors in a chase. Dead by Daylight is a very dark game, and not like thematically, I mean literally dark, it's hard to see. There are times when you lose vision of your target and you have to rely on scratch marks to find them again. Another way to find survivors is to keep an eye out for audio notifications. If a survivor does something, be it missing a skill check, unhooking a survivor, sabotaging hook, be AFK for too long, or some other killer-specific interaction, you will get a notification telling you exactly where that thing happened. If you're not busy doing something else, you can go to that location and probably find a survivor in the vicinity. Once you've found a survivor, the chase commences. Survivors have a lot of resources on the map to keep you just outside of hitting range, and a skilled survivor may even know how to use them. These resources are, however, largely limited. As survivors drop pallets and you break them, their resources dwindle, and it gradually becomes easier and easier to catch survivors as the match progresses. And while windows never go away, you can also vault windows, and their effectiveness is greatly diminished when any nearby pallets are taken out of play. But getting the top of your head smashed with pallets and subsequently breaking them afterwards isn't enough to win you the match. You need to land hits. By default, and assuming the survivor's at full health, you need to hit a survivor twice in order to down them, unless you're using a killer with a chainsaw, as chainsaws are always one-shot downs. Once you've downed a survivor, you have the option to pick them up and put them on a nearby hook. And you need to hook a single survivor a grand total of 3 times to finally take them out of the match. Repeat this 4 times and congratulations, you killed everyone. Alternatively, when you down someone, you can opt not to pick them up and instead chase another nearby survivor. This is a tactic called slugging, and when it's done at the right time, it can lead to a ton of pressure in your favor, sometimes winning the game outright. When done at the wrong time, however, you can lose all the progress you made since you knocked down that first survivor. Knowing when is the right time to hook a survivor and when is the right time to slug can shift a lot of games in your favor. As a general rule, if you don't see another survivor in your immediate vicinity, just hook your down target and continue as normal. Finally, rounding out the resources survivors have on the map, we have lockers. As someone who plays a mix of both survivor and killer, I always tell people not to hide in lockers, because you will get caught. But people never listen to me, so they do it anyway. And then they have this face of abject shock and surprise when they get caught. So yeah, if you get a notification of someone blowing up a generator and you're there within like 10 seconds and you don't see any scratch marks nearby, there's a good chance that they're hiding in a locker. You may want to check one and see if anyone's in there. If you do find somebody in a locker, it's an instant grab. No injured state, no wiping your blade, they immediately go on your shoulder, which saves you a bunch of time and effort. So thanks, survivors. Thanks for making our lives easy.
You stupid.
Now, killers are always playing against the clock, and generators can get completed really fast if killers aren't applying enough pressure on survivors. So a lot of people need a way to slow down the game in a meaningful way. There are a lot of perks that can help out with this, but kicking generators is a good way that every killer can slow down a game. If you see a generator that's been worked on, you can give it a little kick. It takes about a second and that generator will start sparking and will slowly lose its progress unless the survivor comes and starts repairing it again. If nobody does come to repair it, that generator's progress can go all the way back down to 0, which equals a lot of wasted time for survivors. Also, pro tip, if you want to know the progress of a generator at a glance, each of the 4 pistons on the top of the generator signify 25% towards its progress. So if 2 pistons are moving really fast but the other 2 aren't moving at all, then the generator is about 50% done. Additionally, the speed and intensity of the sound a generator makes increases as it gets closer to 100%. Now, killers don't have items that they can bring in the same way that survivors do. That function is replaced by the killer's ability. Each killer has an ability, from throwing hatchets, teleporting around the map, being fast as fuck boy, I'm fast as fuck boy, and being really, really gross. What killers do share in common with survivors, however, is that they can equip add-ons. Now, every killer has the boring add-ons, the ones that just make your abilities slightly better in some way. Some of them are pretty good, but they're not that interesting. When we get to the purple and pink rarity add-ons, that's when things can get a little crazy. These higher rarity add-ons can change the way a killer behaves entirely. Again, won't go into extreme detail, but probably the most notorious example of this in effect is our boy Mikey Myers. Where normally Myers is about stalking survivors to level up his ability, ultimately giving him one-shot capabilities for a short time, the add-on Scratched Mirror throws all that away. It forces him to stay in tier 1 where he's essentially a stealth killer, and gives him wall hacks anytime he starts stalking. Get yourself in a claustrophobic indoor map and jump scare Myers as born, popping around corners like a madman and making survivors shit their pants. It's amazing. Like survivors, killers can bring a total of 4 perks into the match. Again, a lot of perks in this game, so won't go into massive detail about what each perk does. But most killer perks can be categorized into slowdown perks, which are perks designed to slow the game down, combat perks, which increase your combat effectiveness in some way, shape, or form, tracking perks, which help you find survivors on the map, stealth perks, which help you close in on survivors without them knowing, and usually involve messing with your terror radius, and debilitation perks, which involve making survivor actions more difficult, therefore making them more prone to messing up. Here are some good perks to look out for early on. No perk recommendation could be complete without talking about the godsend of a perk known as barbecue and chili. Now, if you ask anyone who's played this game for more than 7 minutes, they'll tell you that blood point grind is real. This perk effectively doubles your blood points at the end of every match, and is a really good tracking perk to boot. This is the one perk that I'd say is worth buying the DLC in order to get. That'd be Leatherface's DLC, by the way. So, killers have a love-hate relationship with Hex Ruin, and that it's really, really good, but it's not fun to play against, and its effectiveness is entirely based on RNG. Ruin, in essence, demotes all skill checks on generators, so great skill checks become normal skill checks, and normal skill checks become missed skill checks that don't alert the killer. Ruin is a Hex perk, which means that one of the 5 dull totems on the map will activate, becoming a lit totem, and once a survivor finds and destroys that lit totem, Ruin is out of the match, for good. So as you can imagine, if it lasts for half the match, it's doing some real work. But each time you play a match where the totem lasts for years, it feels like there's 3 where the totem gets found in the first 20 seconds. If you don't like the RNG nature of Ruin, there are less powerful but more reliable alternatives such as Corrupt Intervention. Enduring is a perk that reduces the duration of pallet stuns by 50%, which makes recovery time almost instant. This might not seem like a big deal, but on top of faster stun recovery, it promotes good habits in your killer gameplay, that being to not respect pallets. If you're fighting a competent survivor and they notice that you respect pallets, they'll exploit it for the rest of the match. Equip Enduring and swing through every pallet. Make it second nature. You would not believe how many free hits you can get by swinging through pallets. As a small aside, don't run Enduring on Nurse or Huntress specifically. Their abilities make it so that you don't need to worry about pallet stuns. Great on everyone else though. Alright, so Brutal Strength is pretty simple. It makes breaking pallets and generators slightly faster, something you'll be doing a lot by the way, and it pairs great with Enduring. Recover from pallet stuns in a half second, break the pallet with your increased speed, and continue the chase. Whispers is a great tracking perk, and it's not locked behind a teachable like most perks, so it's a great perk to start with. If you're within a certain proximity to a survivor, this perk will light up and the entity will start making Minecraft zombie sounds, letting you know that somebody's nearby. Now it's worth noting that tier 1 and 2 of this perk aren't that great. The activation radius of those 2 ranks are just too large to give you any real information. But tier 3, this perk is amazing. I run it all the time. Okay, so I can't believe I'm suggesting this, but here we go anyway. No one escapes death, NOED for short, is a stupid bullshit perk that rewards you for playing poorly as killer. NOED also isn't a teachable perk, so you can get it from the get-go. Like Ruin, NOED is a hex perk, but unlike Ruin, NOED will only light up a totem once all 5 generators have been completed. While that totem is active, you will one-shot down everybody on regular hits. This means no hatchets, no bear traps, no pig or demogorgon dashes. It has to be a regular hit. Nobody likes playing against this perk. Getting killed by it feels cheap and undeserved. So why am I suggesting it? Because I want you to keep playing the game, alright? The learning curve for killer can be brutal, and sometimes you get paired up against a team of what feels like professional survivor players, and you just can't touch them. These matches can feel super demoralizing, especially when they happen back to back, and NOED is very likely to get you a free kill each match. So I'm hoping that's enough reward to encourage you to keep at it and learn to play without NOED. Also, one last note on NOED, it will not activate if all 5 totems on the map have been cleansed before the 5th generator is completed. But these instances are rare. Very few teams take the time to cleanse every totem. Again, like Survivor, there are other great perks you can try out, but this should be a good starter kit for most killers. Now as killer, you have this red stain in front of your character that goes out about 2 to 3 meters and signifies which way you're looking. You can't see it, but survivors can, and good survivors use this information to predict your actions when you're about to round corners. So one thing you can do is hide your bloodstain by looking the opposite direction of the way you're going, and walk backwards into the place you want to go. This will confuse a lot of survivors, especially if you're playing a shorter killer, as they have to make a guess where you are and where you're going to go. It sounds silly, but I'm serious. Where you look versus where you go is very important, and something you should incorporate into your killer play as soon as possible. This is the tip of the iceberg in a massive skill set called mind gaming. Mind gaming is used to counter looping. It's the yin to the survivor's yang. Learning how to mind game will net you hits far faster than just holding down your forward button until the survivor finally runs into a place without pallets. Now, mind gaming and outsmarting your opponent is a really deep rabbit hole and takes hundreds to thousands of hours to master. And I'll give you the same advice that I gave to survivors about looping with a small caveat. Focus on the fundamentals and look up some mind gaming tutorials when you feel like you're ready for the foray into elite gamerhood. The aforementioned caveat being to try that look one way, go the other trick I told you. In low ranks, I guarantee you that's going to be enough to blow the minds of most survivors. And finally, here are some tips, do's, and don'ts of playing killer. If you're looking to get better at killer, don't face camp hooks. I see a lot of new killers do it. Not only is it a bad strategy that banks on other survivors being overly altruistic and not making the correct decision to complete literally every gen on the map while you stand in one spot, but you're not improving your gameplay by having a tea party with a hooked target. Also, they'll teabag you at the exits and you kinda deserve it because you ruined everybody's fun by deciding not to play the game. You don't have to break every pallet as soon as they're dropped. If the walls surrounding the pallet are really short, we call those unsafe pallets, and these are essentially free hits on survivors who try and play on them. That being said, if the pallet has really long walls or is the killer shack pallet, break it immediately, because you won't get a hit on a survivor while that pallet is down unless the survivor seriously messes up. You can grab survivors off of generators, coming out of lockers, and if they slowly vault a pallet or window. And this functions the same as being caught in a locker, that being no second health state, they immediately go on your shoulder. This, along with her dash, is the reason why I love playing the pig so much. Sneaking up and getting grabs off generators is super satisfying. If you can herd the survivors to complete all the gens on one side of the map, you can pull off what's called a 3-gen strategy. When they have 1 generator left to complete, the only 3 left are really close to each other, which makes them super easy for you to patrol. You can dismantle entire matches if you can play a 3-gen strategy correctly. This might be my inner pig main talking, but don't forget about your killer abilities, guys. You have them for a reason. If you're dealing with Loop Master McGee, and you've been chasing him for the past minute to minute and a half and you've made no progress, don't be afraid to cut your losses and look for another survivor to chase. You need to end chases quickly to maintain consistent pressure, and one overly long chase at the wrong time can cost you the match. I don't want to promote tunneling or anything, but getting that first survivor out of the match is a big deal. Survivor productivity slows down dramatically with only 3 players. Use your ears and get yourself a decent pair of headphones. If you listen closely, you can hear a lot of nearby survivor activity in-game. You can even hear the breathing of uninjured survivors and the rustling of grass when they move. It's really subtle, but if you can parse it out, it will help you find those blindettes lying in wait. When you knock down somebody, take a look around to see if there are any other survivors hanging around looking to save their teammate with a flashlight or a pallet drop. They generally have to put themselves out in the open nearby to be able to position themselves properly for a flashlight save, and if you catch them in the act, it's usually a free hit, giving you even more pressure. Additionally, if you down someone near a wall or some other large object, you can look at the wall while picking up the survivors to essentially make you impossible to flashlight blind. Practice, practice, practice. Practice the killer or killers you like to play. If you have a friend to play Dead by Daylight with, go into a custom match with them and just practice them. Seriously, practicing your killer is a dying art form and is why so many people think Ruin is necessary for every killer. Finally, to round off this video, there are a couple remaining topics that are shared among both Survivor and Killer that I'd like to go over now. In the pre-game setup, there's one last thing that we haven't mentioned, those being offerings. There are a number of different offerings, but most either affect how the map will be generated or are blood point boosters. Offerings can dictate which map you go to, can inform how foggy a map is, or how many chests spawn. The really important offerings are the escape cakes and their killer equivalent, Survivor puddings, and bloody party streamers, which double the amount of blood points you get at the end of a match. Also, the killer has an offering known as a Mori. Moris give you the ability to kill survivors by your own hands. They play a neat animation and kill them outright. They're actually really powerful because you only need to hook a survivor once, then down them again to use it. Once you get your survivor or killer to level 50, you'll have the option to prestige them. Doing so will return them back to level 1 and take away any perks, items, add-ons, or offerings you had on that character, so use all your escape cakes and survivor puddings before prestiging. In return, you get a neat bloodied up cosmetic. You can prestige up to 3 times and you'll get a different bloody cosmetic each time. Apparently, your chances of getting rare stuff in the blood web also increases you prestige up, but it's not very noticeable. You do not have to play a character to level them up. You can play your favorite character, then use the blood points you get from playing them to invest in another character. It all comes out of the same shared pool. Your survivor and killer have separate ranks, and it's supposed to be a determinant of how good you are at the game. In reality, ranks don't actually mean too much. It's a sign of how much you've played lately more than anything, so don't worry about it. Ranks always reset on the 13th of every month. The 3 currencies in this game are blood points, iridescent shards, and auric cells. Blood points you get at the end of every match and directly correlates to your in-game score. Iridescent shards you also get in-game, but are rewarded every time your account levels up, which is also just a thing that happens when you play the game. Don't think too much about it. Auric cells are the game's premium currency that you either have to spend real-world money on or win a sponsored beginner's guide contest for. But yeah, you can buy characters and cosmetics with auric cells. You can also buy characters and cosmetics with iridescent shards, but not all cosmetics can be bought with this currency, some are real money only. Also, any licensed characters must be bought with real money. Don't ask me why, I think it's a legal thing. Finally, let's talk about the Shrine of Secrets. The Shrine of Secrets can be found in the shop and is selling teachable perks. You can buy teachable perks you don't own here and not have to grind up the character for the perk, or the more common scenario, not have to buy the DLC. Matt, the head man behind Dead by Daylight, once told me that what perks that are chosen for the shrine are completely random, but I'm not entirely sure I believe him. So that's about everything you need to know to get into Dead by Daylight. I hope you had as much fun watching the video as I did making it. Now get out there and bully some kiddos. Also set your graphics settings to low.